The farm I grew up on is rather famous locally for being haunted. Its story is a bit long though, so please bear with me. The farmhouse itself sits far back from the country road, an 1860s-era farm that had been vacant for over a decade when we bought it. My father always made a point of mentioning how good a deal it was. I don't remember the early years very well. I was 6 or so when we moved in, but I do remember the regular as clockwork coming of the haunt. It came every Sunday night at 12:45 a.m. just as Monday began. It started outside in the barn, pounding and thrumming and moving like a big man walking slow. It grew louder, gaining odd little squeaks and pops as it came. When it reached the side porch, the house resonated, making the bricks in the wall shiver. Then there was a pause. I always imagined the thing fishing a key out of a furry vest pocket, as next always came the slow opening of the kitchen door, then the loud bang of the door slamming shut, as if to say, "I'm here." Fast, odd-sounding steps all through the downstairs followed, steps that sounded like the world's largest basketball overfilled with air and slammed against the old wooden floorboards. Pang, pang, pang. The odd pneumatic sound ringing for a brief second between each. Sooner or later it headed for the stairs. To climb them nice and slow, floorboards shuddering in time with each step, until it came to the top, in my bedroom. Right above the kitchen and open to the stairs, my room was the kind old-timers refer to as dormer room, or dormer, being an old English word for open and doorless, well suited for trapping little boys on the wrong side of the stairs with monsters. It wasn't so bad at first. The haunt would come up the stairs, making the house shake with each step. Pang, 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 until it reached the top. Then it entered stealth mode, wandering through my room quietly, just loud enough for me to hear, now and then purposefully bumping my bed or the dresser next to my head. Sometimes it would lean over me, huffling gently in my face, daring me to open my eyes. If I'd already hidden under the covers, it would very slowly pull the bedclothes off of me. They'd creep away an inch at a time, as if scrunched under someone's fingers. Someone at the very foot of my bed, less than a hand's length away from my feet. I'd wait and wait, then try and pull them up. Sometimes they came, sometimes they didn't. Before too long, but never soon enough, the haunt wandered in to visit the rest of my family, starting with my parents. Then would move on to my sisters, and many a Monday morning came with their bedclothes needing washed. Then Dad discovered that it wouldn't come out into the light. Someone left the bedroom overhead on one night, and the haunt stopped cold at the light spilling from the open doorway. Of course, the bathroom was past my room, leaving me trapped in the dark with the haunt. Neither of us were very happy about it. First it shook the staircase until plaster dust rained and floorboards warped, but the light stayed on. Then it flew into my room at speed, making the walls shake and my dresser fall over, and yank the covers from my bed. It leaned down to where it seemed inches from my face. I felt something like cat's fur dragging across my chin, my lips, and then off the bed, only to have it come back up the other side and across me a couple of times. I never wet the bed as a child, but that night I came close. Then, for the first time, it started going through my things. We were a farm family and not very well off, so I didn't have many toys. Of the few I had, I loved my Hot Wheels the most. Hot Wheels, if you're wondering, are little metallic replicas of famous automobiles. The haunt slung them around the room like mini jets, clipping one of my eyebrows. I've still got the scar. Then it tore through the crawl space on either side of my room where old books, clothing, and other things were stored, leaving piles of shredded paper and torn fabric behind. In the morning, I was blamed for most of the mess, and, worse still, my Hot Wheels were gone. The next weekend, it spent most of the night in my room again. At school on Monday, I was sent to the nurse's station twice, then finally they called my dad to come get me early. So the next Sunday, when the haunt reached my room and began to brood and shake the bed, I was desperate. "Nobody can see you from where they're at," I hissed in the smallest little boy whisper. "Just go shut the bathroom door." 9 seconds later, the bathroom door slammed shut so hard it cracked down the middle, the lights snapped off, and all chaos broke loose. The next morning, I felt better than I had in weeks. I'd actually slept. My family's creeping denial about our ghosts had vanished, and my Hot Wheels were back in their stands. Sunday nights after that stayed exciting for a long time. A cake baked late Sunday for an early before leaving for camp birthday party became a film that completely covered the kitchen from ceiling to floor, except for the plate the cake had been on. That was clean. Another time, my stern old Baptist grandma brought her pastor up from West Virginia. They spent all of Sunday praying the haunt away, only to be chased out of bed and out of the house by some god-awful heathen spirit. But the best had to be the haunting of Tabby and Fat Rat. Like most places, our little community had its share of delinquents, especially of the juvenile variety. One, a perpetual high school senior, went by the nickname of Tabby. His wingman and partner in crime was a sophisticated and reserved fellow known as Fat Rat. These two lousy but unlovable losers were behind a rash of thefts in the local farm community, though they hadn't yet been caught. Farmers keep fuel on hand for tractors. Tabby and Fat Rat would sneak up to a farm during the wee hours and fill their tank with someone else's gasoline. They hadn't gotten around to our place yet when my dad heard about the thefts. Being a practical man, he switched the signs on the diesel and gasoline tanks. As luck would have it, Tabby and Fat Rat tooled up our long driveway late one Sunday night and, by the light of the lone security lamp between the barn and the house, filled the tank of Tabby's '74 Chevelle. Filled it all the way up, with diesel fuel. Right around midnight or so. Being awake, Dad heard them pull away. By this point, he reached the kitchen window where the phone, landline only in these days, hung and was dialing the sheriff. What happens next is pieced together from his telling and what the sheriff, Tabby, and Fat Rat told people later. It started with the outside security light growing dimmer and dimmer, then dying. Then, in the dark, there was this odd, huffling sound. Neither of the boys knew what it was, where it came from, but I could have told them. Whatever was making that noise nuzzled up to the back of Tabby's neck, just as he realized he couldn't see a thing. He screeched and jumped in the Chevelle, screaming obscenities, and Fat Rat realized he was in real trouble. Something even bigger and hairier than him was blocking the car door. Something that pinched him so hard it left purplish knots, some in very tender places. The Chevelle's engine roared. The diesel in the gas tank started toward the carburetor, helped along by Tabby's foot pushing the pedal to the floor. The car jumped forward, and so did Fat Rat. His head bounced off the roof, breaking his nose, but fear gave him strength enough to heave his flubbery self on board. I heard the engine and reached a window just as the boys were flying down the driveway, arms outstretched, middle fingers extended. Dad had to dial twice to reach the county sheriff. He was laughing so hard. He knew what was coming. Just about 20 yards onto the main road, the Chevelle's engine clattered, shuddered, and died. There's a certain darkness that comes only on a Midwestern night when there's no moon, when the stars are hidden by the fall clouds and you're a dozen miles from the nearest neighbor. It's a darkness that circles your Chevelle as the headlights die, as the dome light flickers, a darkness that comes in bursts and snatches until it's complete. And in the cold, dark car, with you. They ran as long as they could, something furry and nimble bumping them, pinching them, tripping them to fall so it could hover over them, huffling happily until they ran again, screaming. When the county sheriff came for them, they flagged him down, happy to get in the cruiser. The deputy had to take them straight to county correctional and sent another sheriff to check in with us. The boy screamed when he tried to turn into our driveway. Maybe the haunt got used to us, or us to it, but either way, things slowed down over the years. By the time we could afford to move, it didn't seem so bad. At first it seemed almost distracted, then started doing less during each visit. It would barely roam through the house before it was off, as if in a hurry to get back to something more important. Then came a Sunday night when it didn't show at all. Soon enough, once became a few, and a few became common. By the time I entered high school, the rare visit by our resident spook was more a reassurance that it still walked than it was a night of terror. The very last time came just as we were moving. I had graduated high school that summer. My parents had divorced, and I was helping my father move the last of his things. We were down to this huge old steel desk. He'd use a Ford forklift tractor to move it into the second floor, and I had no idea how we'd get it out. Dad had gone home to be back in the morning, while I decided that driving home and back wasn't worth the 2 hours sleep I'd lose. It didn't even occur to me that it was Sunday night. Tired, I curled up into a corner with a pillow and blanket and fallen dead asleep, only to be wakened by the most horrific noise. Every drawer in that huge steel desk had been slung open at once, hard enough to bend some of the rollers inside. I thought I'd had a heart attack. It took me a second to realize what was going on, that the haunt was making a last appearance. "Yeah," I said very quietly into the empty house. "I'll miss you too." Then I turned the light on and went back to sleep. About 2 years ago, my aunt died, and it would be the third sibling that my mom lost. She lost her brother to murder, a sister to special needs complications, and then her other sister to a heart attack. My mom was devastated and was having PTSD symptoms still from her brother's murder, and my aunt's death sent her into a downward spiral that I didn't think she would recover from. One day, I was talking to a friend about my mom and the pain she was going through when she mentioned that she had had a friend whose parents died, and she went to see a medium with her, and that the experience blew her away, and that maybe I could try taking my mom to see her too. I was skeptical at first because the only other experience I had with psychics or mediums didn't impress me, and I was sure most or all of them were con artists. My friend assured me that if anyone was the real deal, it was this woman. She had said the right names of the parents, knew that she had items of the parents with her and what they were. She also got their personalities right, and the messages were clear, and everything she said was exactly right. The woman had a huge emotional release after the session and hasn't had any more depressive episodes since, and feels like she can move on with life. Basically, this conversation convinced me to pay almost $200 for a session if it was even remotely going to help my mom. I didn't want to tell my mom what we were doing that day because I was scared it would get her hopes up. If this woman turned out to be a fraud, I would never forgive myself for hyping up my mom and dealing with the downfall. When we got there, and I met this woman, I knew I was going to like her right away. She looked like a well-put-together rock star. Her eyes were the lightest, prettiest blue color I had ever seen, and I immediately felt warm and comfortable. She set my mom and I down, and we started the session. She explained how she worked and continued. The first person to come up was my uncle. He immediately started talking about how I didn't do what I promised to do. I promised him about a month before he died that I would stop worrying so much. He was right. I didn't live up to that promise, and I beat myself up over and over again over things I can't control. As I was watching the conversations between the woman and my mom, I saw my mom change. There were tears streaming down her face as she acknowledged that everything that the woman was saying was, in fact, correct. There were things that my mom couldn't control that led to her siblings' deaths. She realized that day that nothing was her fault and that when she wants to communicate with her family, she can, because they were right there with her all the time. After this session, I saw this woman 2 other times and even took one of her classes. The last one-on-one session I had with her was a few weeks ago, and the reason why I'm writing this. 3 weeks ago, my closest cousin had ended their own life by gunshot to the head. I was at a complete loss. She seemed to be doing okay. Our whole family has some kind of mental issue, and there are family members who are a lot worse off than she was, So it really made me question what some of the people in my family were capable of, including myself. Ironically enough, I had a session booked with the medium that I had booked about 2 months in advance, not realizing that this would happen 1 week before my session. I don't know why, but knowing that I had that session the next week was the only thing getting me through the initial shock of her death. Finally, the day of the session comes, and I was so nervous I almost puked. I was so close to a person who died, and I had an extreme amount of unanswered questions. And in this weird circumstance, I had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to find out exactly what was going through her mind that night. When the session started, I started to feel a little less anxious and just wanted to know. Other family members actually came through first, which surprised me since I specifically only asked for one person. When the medium gets done talking about others' family members, she asks me if there is anything else on family I would like to touch on. I told her that there was a recent death that I was surprised hasn't come forward yet. She then goes, Oh, ouch, my head is killing me right now. I sat in silence, knowing why. A gunshot to the head would probably cause that. The medium then started to cry and told me that the energy of this woman is extremely overwhelming. At first, the medium thought that she was murdered by the quickness that it happened, but then she said no, that's not what happened, and then her head started to hurt more. The medium then said she definitely ended her own life, but my cousin was not showing her death taking place like they usually do for her. My cousin was unable to talk about her own death. My grandma was apparently standing in front of her, doing some of the talking for her. The medium then told me that when my cousin shot herself, she did not know what she was doing. She then said that she had talked to the people on the spirit side who had planned the ending of their own life and knew exactly what they were doing, but she didn't say that. I basically learned that my cousin had a lot of healing to do on the spirit side and that she needs to get to the point where she can talk about her own death. My cousin wouldn't even apologize to her own family. She stepped forward and said that there needs to be apologies all around. It really made me realize that even though you die, your energy does not die. You don't get the reel of your life flashing before your eyes that cause you to realize and learn and become completely at peace. Maybe some people are all of a sudden at peace, but my cousin is not one of them. All I can do is try to talk to her myself and remind her that everything will be okay in the end, and all her family will be up there with her one day, and I hope that she'll have something to teach us by the time we get there. One crisp and frosty Saturday morning when I was about 10 years of age, my friend called round for me. We went into the woods that were next to my house and proceeded to trudge towards a pond called Mermaid's Pool. Now the pond is quite a strange place. Me and my friends all thought it was spooky. Over the years I explored miles of woodland in the area and never found another one. It's an oddity, and a local historian traced the name Mermaid's Pool back as far as the Middle Ages, so it's been there at least a few hundred years. It's surrounded on 3 sides by mature birch trees whose bare roots go down into the lake, and on the 4th side is a steep 50 to 60 feet tall grassy bank with odd clumps of gorse bush. We walked through the woods until we reached the top of the steep bank and proceeded to yank stones out of the frosty ground and hurl them down at the pond to try and break the ice on its surface. We couldn't break it, but it was pleasing to create fracture lines and watch the stones skid across the ice. We could see a man walking along the path to the side of the pool through the trees. He was quite tall and stocky, and wore dark clothing with a chunky black coat. He was accompanied by a large black dog that walked right beside him, despite the fact that it wasn't on a lead. The path is quite windy as it nears the pond, and at one point he had his back to us. We saw he had a bright orange triangle on the back of his coat. He proceeded to the opposite side of the pond from us and then stood at the edge with his dog and stared intently up at us. I felt intimidated enough that I stopped finding and throwing stones. There was a fair amount of distance between us, and there was the steepness of the bank, but it was the dog that I was worried about. My friend had other ideas. He was older, tougher, and braver than me. He carried on hurling stones, though he aimed a bit shorter and adjusted his trajectory to minimize the possibility of hitting the guy. The dog started growling up at us, only it was no ordinary growl. It was the loudest I'd ever heard, more like a massive wolf or lion. The place had weird acoustics, but nevertheless it was just too loud. I doubt very much if we could have heard a normal growl from the top of the bank. The noise, coupled with the intense glare from the motionless guy, was enough for me. I turned to leave and told my friend we should get out of there. He nodded, but stood still for a moment and remarked upon the crazy loud growl. He was determined to commit one final act of defiance and said something like, "Just one more." He found a good-sized stone, and we both looked down towards the guy as my friend raised his arm to throw it. The guy was the same, motionless and staring, but his dog had lost interest in us and was sniffing the base of the tree behind them. But though the dog was turned away, the growling continued, as loud as ever. My friend dropped his stone, and we stared open-mouthed at each other. It wasn't the dog that had been growling. It was the man. We ran for ages, probably a full 5 minutes back towards my house. When we rested up for a little while, feeling grateful that the weird guy with the stare and the booming growl was behind us, but more strangeness was to come. We went back around my house to get a drink and to tell my brother about our encounter. My angry mother accosted me as soon as we got through the back door and reprimanded me for being 25 minutes late for lunch. I knew for a fact that we left for the woods at about 10:15. It wasn't long after some Saturday morning show I watched had ended at 10. Our entire escapade lasted an hour at most, including journey's time. So how was it now 1:25 p.m.? There was over 2 hours missing. I used to bump into my friends as adults from time to time until I left the area. It was never long into the conversation that one of us would say, "Do you remember old Growler?" And it would all come flooding back. So to start a little backstory, my husband and I lived in a big city in a teeny tiny house, around 500 square feet. We were planning our wedding and starting a family soon, so we couldn't stay there anymore. Well, I couldn't. He was okay with it. We had dreams of moving out into the country, and we found such an amazing deal on 320 acres that we had to check it out. We emailed the realtor, and she had said the lady living there wasn't ready to show the house yet. She didn't want to sell, so she wasn't sure when she could show it. We asked that we could come and see the land, and the house would be fine until we could build our dream home further away from the highway. So we go as excited as ever. We pull up and get out of our truck. All you could hear was birds and the wind. It was so peaceful and quiet in comparison to city life. We knew this was our home. The realtor arrived and the owner wasn't home, so she showed us the house. It was 1,300 square feet, so it felt like a mansion to us. The lady who owned it was 80-some years old and lived on the property alone. Her children wanted her to move closer to them for fear something could happen to her. She always went out into the field on her quad, not trusty at all, in her beat-up van. So inside her house there were pictures of saints everywhere. She was Haitian, and I got the voodoo vibe, but not at all in a negative concept. So we go explore the outbuildings. One of them has a chair, a ton of burnt-out candles, and some knives. More voodoo vibes again, not negative. It's a religion, and I'm not one to judge what people believe. We ended up meeting the lady, and she took us on her quad to see the land. It stalled a few times. She was really fun, upbeat. She also seemed to like my husband and myself. So we made an offer and got the house. I was really excited. We had a bunch of friends help us move in November of 2016. I burned sage in the house because that's something I do. I never got any negative vibes, but just to clear it out for our belongings. I had a friend with me and she said she saw a shadow move, so she also went over to the house with sage just to be safe. We do know someone died on the property, cutting trees down, so I wanted to be on the safe side. Another friend got super creepy vibes that night. They stayed on the main level bedroom, and she said the entire night it felt like someone was watching her. On the main level in the original house, there's the bedroom, kitchen, living room, and an oversized pantry. There were 2 bedrooms upstairs. There was an addition on the main level. It had the dish pit, aka sink, and cupboards, but not enough room for a table in the bathroom and its own little cellar basement. The original basement looks like something out of a dungeon with giant boulders and unfinished. The pillars holding the beams up are trees rather than 4x4s. It's very rustic and I love it, but it can give off weird vibes. I'm no stranger to ghosts, as I grew up in a haunted house, but that's another long story. My husband has always been very skeptic. The beat-up, falling-apart barn always creeped me out. I never liked it, and I would just avoid it. Half of the roof was caving in. It looked a little like a scene from a horror movie. It even creeped out my husband. He felt like something was always going to jump out at him when he was fixing things in there. Now on to the paranormal bits. So I can't remember really when this started, as so much as has happened in the years we lived here, but it started when I was walking into the living room and passed by the basement stairs. I saw a black dog, almost pit bull shaped, sitting at the bottom of the stairs with red eyes. I did a double take and it wasn't there. I went into the basement thinking it was our big dog, Mastiff Rottweiler Shepherd Lab Cross, but he wasn't there. He was in the dish pit. So I tell my husband and shake it off. I felt uneasy about it, but didn't want to make a big deal of it. Next event, I have a miscarriage. Not sure how long after this, maybe a few months, so I am in a pretty dark place. We also had a falling out with a very close friend that ended up being pretty messy, and some huge negative family drama with an in-law. The in-law is very verbally abusive and manipulative. A few months later, husband has to work a job overnight in another province. First night by myself in the house. It was creepy. I felt so uneasy the entire night. I was so thankful he was gone the one night. It felt like I wasn't alone. My dogs were a little on edge. It was super windy and stormy out. It was a perfect scene for a horror movie. So I went to bed early and slept it away. Carrying on again, I'm pregnant once more. Our baby boy was growing wonderfully. Our 2 old dogs, Japanese chins, had some crazy dental work done. They weren't happy campers, so they were up all night. My pregnant self was tired and cranky, so I took my Yorkie Poo to the main level guest bed to sleep. She was pretty restless. She kept looking to a corner of the room and then moving to different parts of the bed trying to get comfortable, always to sit up and look at that corner. This is the bedroom my friend had very negative vibes from, so my Yorkie Poo started growling at that corner of the room. So we noped out of there pretty quick and suffered a sleepless night with our recovering dogs. It was super dark and you couldn't see anything in the room. Then we had a music festival on our property in June. It was fun and related to this in the future. Lovely baby boy decided to be a breech baby and kick my nerves all the time to the point I couldn't walk. So I started maternity leave early at 36 weeks, due end of July 2018. So I am home now all day. The house felt so different than just being home on evenings and weekends. It felt like a heaviness. I couldn't go in the basement if it was dark out, only in the daytime. I just got this feeling something bad would happen if I did. I constantly felt like I was being watched. If the small dogs were in our bedroom, the Yorkie Poo would bark and growl at anyone coming up the stairs, which was a new behavior for her. This is when I started getting feelings like I would be followed up the stairs. Baby boy is born and he's a night owl, so I am up a lot in the night, which isn't normal for me. Our top floor is 3/4 stories, so there's storage space where all the walls are because of that corner angle of the roof. And in baby boy's bedroom, there's an opening with no door. I feed him in his room so not to disturb the husband as he is still going to work. It feels like something is watching and waiting in there. I would avoid looking at it because I felt like if I did, I would see glowing eyes or something worse. Even just walking the hallway between bedrooms is very uncomfortable during these nighttime feedings. I end up starting to see these shadows following me, which was creepy, and it defied all science. I always tried to debunk things I saw so I wouldn't work myself up into a frenzy. These shadows were also so large. They'd be as tall as the ceiling, 10 feet, and were disproportionate looking. I would try to recreate the shadows with my steps, but it never worked. As for the feelings, I always tried to make myself believe it was in my head, just an overactive imagination. Sometimes knocking would come from the basement, especially when the internet wasn't working and our modem and router were in the basement. That would be awful because I had to work up a lot of nerve to go fix the internet, as it was my lifeline without cable. We moved the guest bed into the basement. I was going to sleep there one night so I could catch up, and my husband was going to feed the baby boy at night. So I settle up in the basement, get all comfy cozy and excited for a night's sleep. Turn off the lights, and there's this green light on the ceiling. It's fading in and out slightly, but in no regular pattern, so I am thinking it's a reflection on the ducking or something. Turn on the lights, and it's solid wood where the green light was. There also isn't any green light to cause a reflection. I noped out of there and went into our travel trailer on a cold fall night. We had another festival in September. Ended up talking to someone that was there in June, so they're asking me about our other big black dog. And I'm like, there's just the one. And they are dead serious. They saw this big pit bull-like dog in the field at both festivals. So this kind of made me feel like I wasn't going crazy and reassured me that I was experiencing something real. But then it made me realize I'm not crazy, and this is happening, and it's pretty terrifying. When husband is at work, I'm very isolated. Our closest neighbor is a mile away. All our family lives an hour drive away. So I'm a little freaked out with everything going on. I'm talking to our local friends and city friends. I get in touch with a medium. She got me to text her a photo of our house. She says the land is bad, the house is bad, and the dog is possibly a demon. She offered to come help me salt the house for gas money. She never charged me anything. She never told me why the land is bad, and to this day I am still very curious. So I ended up getting a local church group to come pray through the house. It really didn't do anything, but they told me some crazy stories of other houses they had blessed, so the area was pretty haunted. So I am super unhappy still because my husband is about to leave for 8 weeks, and I don't want my son growing up in a haunted house like I did. I am also so uncomfortable in the home and about to be alone with our little guy. Someone gets me in touch with a shaman. He comes and does his thing. Really cool to watch. So he finishes up and tells me what he found. Lots of shadow people. In that hideaway space upstairs, at the top of the stairs and bottom, basically everywhere where I felt like I was being watched and such. Apparently shadow people feed on negative thoughts. Also, I never explained specifics to them, so it was neat that his findings matched my experiences. The shadow people weren't feeding off of me, but rather my husband. But I am super sensitive, so I was getting all the bad vibes. The dog was, as he said, 80% gone, and if it wasn't, he would come back. He said the barn was awful and we should just burn it. He set up a crystal grid around the property to protect us in the future from negative spirits. We talked about some of my past experiences, me having so many, and the previous owner. I feel as though her voodoo was protecting her from what we were experiencing. The shaman was lovely. He gave me some blue corn for storing some of my crystals and gave me some suggestions to help my sensitivities at bay. Shaman leaves. Husband comes home, says the house feels lighter, and he couldn't believe it. Fast forward a few more months. I was watching Netflix with my little baby sleeping in my arms. Husband comes home and says, I think I saw something. So that was a little vague, so I pry a bit. He thought one of our little Japanese chins went into the bathroom. It was a white and small thing that went in there. Our chins are black and white. So he follows, and the bathroom door was closed. He's so baffled, being the skeptic he is. So I text the shaman up. He says he'll do his thing and get back to me. When he does, he says it's one of our guardians. Sometimes I feel things move through the house, but it's nothing like what we experienced. No more shadows, no phantom dogs. I can go into the basement at night now. I don't like going down there at night because it's still a little creepy. My husband isn't so skeptical anymore. But it was a wild ride from moving in to over 2 years later. At least for now, all is calm in the home. I've mentioned in comments in this sub that there's a cat's ghost in my family. Surprisingly, we refer to it as Ghost Cat. It's an itty-bitty, just out of kittenhood tuxedo cat with a little extra white facial fur. It died around 1992 or so. I have a sister with a strong penchant for narcotics, and she was staying in the third-floor loft at my mom's spindly old Victorian-era home when she brought home this kitten. She had it long enough for it to have discovered how to escape downstairs to the kitchen, where my mother noticed and would feed it. Then it suddenly stopped. Knowing my sister and fearing the worst, my mom went looking and found the poor little thing. It had gotten into the storage attic side of the third floor, went exploring under a loose floorboard, got entrapped, and died. I was home visiting at the time. I'd moved out of state and helped bury it. Apparently, we forgot to tell it that it died, because when I was home to visit the next year, it visited me. I'd gone to sleep in the spare bedroom, making sure that Mom's crazy, sex-crazed, and somewhat vicious old intact tomcat Jack was not locked in with me. I climbed into bed, turned off the nightstand light, and settled back to sleep. And a little something undeniably cat-like jumps on the bed. Being a bit groggy and having cats of my own, it takes a second for me to be concerned, but I'd woken up before with Jack fastened to a leg by claw and teeth, going to town like a jackhammer, so I flipped the light on and hunted for him, intent to throw him out. No cat. Off with the light, back under the covers. Was mostly asleep when I felt the little thump of a small cat on the bed. Turned on the light on the side table. Nothing there. I mentioned it the next morning and am told that the little kit I'd buried the previous year wasn't at rest. It supposedly would jump in the bed with my mom, play and chase back and forth with Jack, and occasionally be seen watching curiously over the house goings-ons. In other words, just being a cat. I didn't believe it much then, but over the years it stopped by when I was home to visit. When Mom got ill enough to swallow her pride, cancer, I came home and couldn't deny that there was a spirited little spirit in the house. Well, I could. It's always just at that line, where it's deniable. When Mom passed, Ghost Cat roamed up and down the stairs loudly. First time I saw the little thing. It slept in my bed that night, too. It shared space with my then-girlfriend, now wife, and our cats, after we took up residence there for a year or so, and when we moved and started setting up Mom's estate. I'd see it out of the corner of my eye as I did repairs or packed family memorabilia. I went back over not long ago, checking pipes against the cold. Electricity off, working with a flashlight. New owners. Nice couple, expecting their first kid, to take possession next month. And just outside of the flashlight beam was this little tuxedo kitty, just vague enough that I couldn't swear I saw it, but enough I knew it was there. So I told it, while working, this wasn't home anymore. It should come home with me. It was about a week later, night before last, that I felt an extra cat thump into the bed. I think. Maybe it's wishful thinking, but I'm pretty sure Ghost Cat moved in with us. So this happened last weekend at my friend's old farmhouse out in the country of North Carolina. I stayed there Friday night and nothing happened. Saturday night he pulled out a spare mattress and I slept in his kid's playroom. The playroom had once been his deceased uncle's bedroom. His uncle died years ago on the farm's property when a tractor's radiator cap blew off and hit him in the forehead. So at around 3:30 a.m. I wake up to my friend's 2-year-old son yelling over and over again, "Leave my room! Leave my room! Leave my room!" He was screaming it as loud as he could and crying uncontrollably. This went on for several minutes. I tried to ignore it, but obviously I was a little creeped out. His dad woke up and asked him what was wrong, what he was talking about. The kid kept crying and said, I don't know. So I got up and told the ghost, okay, you win, and went and slept in another room. My friend said his kid had never done that before, not once. Never woke up yelling something over and over again like that. I wonder if the ghost somehow spoke through him. The next day, the toys in the playroom kept making noises by themselves, going off and playing their music. We went and took the batteries out of them and turned them off, but one of them kept making noise, and we couldn't figure out which one. There was a big red ball that kept changing positions around the room too. I'd walk through the room, which is on the way to the kitchen, and it wouldn't be blocking my path, but when I'd come back, it would have rolled into the walkway. Pretty spooky experience, but overall interesting. My main concern is the ghost messing with my friend's kid. That part bothered me the most. I went into the playroom and told Uncle Ghost that he's an idiot for messing with the kid and that he should pick on another grown man instead. I told my friend to consider getting his kid baptized. I don't know if that would help, but it couldn't hurt. I'll start with my earliest memory of something unexplainable. To start it off, though, I used to consider myself an open-minded skeptic, watching ghost hunters growing up just to laugh and fairly easily debunk their encounters. What interested me was my lack of notable experiences, but the last 10 or so years have started to convince me otherwise. 2005 to 2006, my sister and I would stay the weekends at my dad's house. Important note, there was only 3 of us in the house at the time. The living room was next to the kitchen with 2 open doorways that connected them. In the kitchen was a set of double doors that led to my dad's room. These doors made the most horrendous noises at the hinges that could be heard throughout the entire house. The 3 of us were watching movies in the living room, and around midnight, my dad went to bed. My sister was asleep on the couch, and I was on the floor. Suddenly, there were footsteps in the kitchen. I could feel vibrations caused by the heavy footfalls on the floor. My dad was in his room, my sister still on the couch. This continued for 2 to 3 minutes, just pacing back and forth. After it stopped, I decided I should get some sleep. This next one happened around 2011. I was in high school and living with my mom and stepdad. I would walk home after school every day, and my sister rode the bus from the elementary school. My mom and stepdad worked every day, so I was always the first one home. After a stressful day at school, I went straight to my room and landed on my bed. I just wanted to close my eyes for a bit and unwind. At the foot of my bed, I heard a very loud, deep breath, like a sigh, but it sounded forced. Needless to say, I shut up and looked around. No one was there. I was the only one in the house. Later that year, I woke up in the middle of the night, wide awake like I was being watched. I had this sense of dread come over me, and I looked around the room. My open closet door shut on its own. It didn't slam, but it had some force, enough to make it latch closed. The dreadful feeling went away, and I managed to go back to sleep. At this point, I was convinced there was something in the house, some kind of residual energy or something. One night, I was gaming with some friends. I was the only one awake when I got up to get a glass of water. I took off my headset and set it on the desk. When I got back, my friends were talking about who might have been in my room. They said they heard a woman's voice while I was gone. The house was old, so I assumed that's why these things were happening. After I moved into the first apartment with my girlfriend, I started having second thoughts about that. The building was still pretty new. As far as I knew, there were no deaths in the building. Our dog is very timid, he doesn't bark much, and is scared of anything bigger than him. He wouldn't react to people moving around in the apartment building, or even knocks on our door. One night, he was standing in the hallway staring at the front door. This is out of character for him. I got worried once he started to bark at the door despite no one being outside. I started to contemplate the idea that what this was attached to me somehow. I've read that people can be haunted in the same way that buildings or objects can. I was more serious about it when I heard the deep breathing again, behind me, just like at my mom's house. A deep sigh sounded like it was forced. I spun around in my computer chair and no one was there. These things never happen consistently, maybe a few months apart, sometimes years. I was freaked out when I was touched one day. I was the only one at home when the hat was knocked off my head, right into my lap. Another time my beanie was lifted right off my head like it was being pinched from the top. Those are the only times I've ever been touched by it. After all of this, though, I've never felt threatened by it. I've never felt like I was in danger by what was happening. It was just creepy. Until last year, my job requires me to open on Sunday mornings. This usually meant that I was awake at 4 a.m. and had to be at work by 5. St. Patrick's Day fell on a Saturday last year. We live in a house split up into different apartments, and all the other tenants wanted to throw a big house party Saturday night to celebrate. I'm a pretty light sleeper, so instead of trying to sleep through a party, I wanted to go to work and sleep there. It was going well until about 11 that night. We have a lounge area upstairs. It has some couches and recliners. This lounge area has a sort of overlook above the main lobby of the building with handrails. You can see part of the lobby below you. There are large window panes that look out the front of the building too. They go from the floor all the way to the ceiling. At night, it's too dark to see that far through the windows, only what the spotlights shine on. I was having trouble sleeping on one of these couches. I was having a sense of unease, almost like I wasn't alone. I kept hearing noises in the walls, but I assumed those were just pipes banging around. Then I heard a door close downstairs. When I opened my eyes, there was a bright flash that reflected off the windows and lit up the lobby downstairs. I sat and waited for a bit before closing my eyes again. That's when I felt it. It wasn't like before. All of the experiences before were different. This one felt almost sinister. I've never had the feeling to run as much as I did then. I had this sense that someone was in front of me, almost like a change in air pressure. I immediately got up and ran downstairs. It felt like it followed me. I had this sense of urgency, like I was being threatened. I don't know how else to describe it. I got in the car and hauled it back home. I haven't experienced anything like that since then. I'm not sure that I want to. It's probably important to note that maybe 100 yards away from the building is an old graveyard. The headstones date back to the mid to late 1800s. It's tucked back into some trees, but in the winter, when the trees are dead, you can see it. It always feels kind of eerie around there. I live with 4 people. Our house is from 1950-something. The peanut butter poltergeist. I'm walking downstairs through my kitchen around 3 a.m. when a pot of peanut butter flies off the counter at me and hits me directly in the side. I was more confused than scared, but it was creepy. It's never happened before or since, and the weirdest thing is that week my mom had bought soft peanut butter rather than chunky, and she has never bought it since. Number 2, the black blob incident. This was really spooky for me at the time. Basically in my bedroom, 2nd floor, part of our 2013 extension. In the corner of the room, I have a big cupboard with a set of shelves with a back panel and 2 side panels on top. It's full of books and has even more books on top. My night vision is very good, and I could see my whole room very well, albeit mostly in monochrome as I can't view color all too well in the dark. However, tonight was different. There was a huge blob of black stuff above this cupboard thing, filling that top corner of my room, which was very strange as everything else was fine. But that blob was pitch black and seemed to be growing and shrinking and changing shape like jelly. Again, this happened around 3 a.m. and is never before or since. Its appearance was accompanied by a sense of dread and a huge feeling of being watched, even more than I normally feel at night. Number 3. Numerous weird sightings as a kid. Up to 7. Every night as a kid, I used to go to my mom's room and would hide under the covers every night until my mom came in, and then I'd go to sleep with her. Yeah, I'm probably a baby, but I was young. No matter where I slept, I felt like I was being watched and could see things moving in the dark, so I'd hide in Mom's room. A lot of stuff I'd put down to child me's ADHD-fueled overactive imagination, as I'd often imagined shapes of stuff in the room. Examples of Mom's old wedding dress, morphing into aliens from Doctor Who, for example. But there were things I could never explain, and I wish I still remembered specific examples because this is the perfect place to say them. 4. Possibly my granddad's ghost. My dad's dad died recently, and shortly before his death, he asked my dad for an old ladder-related heavy thing that he had lent my dad. Dad said he thought he had given it back and forgot to go look for it. Then my granddad died, in an ASDA, walking around without a mobility scooter and having fun like he was told not to by his doctors. Dad then found the ladder-related thing a few days after the funeral and left it on his shed because my granddad wouldn't be needing it now. However, one day he was doing some do-it-yourself by his shed using some equipment he'd recently acquired from my half-grandmother, Dad's stepmother, because she didn't need them after my granddad died, when the very heavy, huge ladder-related thing flew off the shed and nearly beheaded him. The ladder thing smashed into the wall and the floor with a crash loud enough to scare the pants off of me in my bedroom, 2 floors above him and with 2 walls between me and him. There was some wind, but nowhere near enough to move anything, let alone this ladder thing. Dad responded to it by saying, All right, I'm sorry, I should have returned it, but you don't need it anymore." And nothing else has happened since. My uncle's had similar experiences with something of my granddad's, but I've forgotten the exact story, and he hasn't had anything happen since my granddad's funeral. It first started when I was 5. As a kid, I always had that feeling of something watching me in my parents' house. Out of the house, everything was gravy, but at my parents' house, it was an eerie, constantly looking over your shoulder feeling. Remember, I was 5. I didn't even know what spirits or ghosts were yet. I was tucked into bed with the bedroom door open. I never slept with the door closed because it always felt like someone was standing over my bed while I was trying to sleep. I woke up because I had to go to the bathroom. Once I turned to get out of bed, I realized it was freezing cold. I looked at the doorway, and there was a little girl standing there with red eyes, wet black hair. She had a raggedy green dress on, and her skin looked like it was underwater for months. No movement at all, and we made literally dead eye contact. I quickly laid back down and threw the covers over my head. I tried to scream for my mother, but my adrenaline was pumping so hard not a single word came out of my mouth. I got the courage to whip the blanket off of me to see if she was still there, and just like that, she was gone. Let's just say I didn't end up having to go to the bathroom after that. A few days after that, I saw the girl who possibly drowned. Toys would start randomly going off in my football-shaped toy box, but not just in the toy box. I had a Furby on my dresser. Every 90s kid had to have one when they first came out, and that Furby would have conversations by itself in the middle of the night. After a while of this, I ended up putting the Furby in the closet and turning the switch off to shut it off. A few nights later, the little idiot started talking to itself again. As the tough, manly 5-year-old I was, I got up, opened the closet to turn off the Furby so it would shut up, and the switch was already off. As I had the Furby in my hand, it opened its eyes and yawned at me. I took the batteries out of it and threw the Furby against the closet wall. I never put batteries back in that toy again. Then other random toys in my toy box would start going off. After a while, I learned to just ignore it. My second paranormal encounter. Jump a couple of years later, my parents have a tri-level house. Going upstairs, the bathroom is the first floor on the left. I was walking by the bathroom, and at the end of the bathroom stood an older lady in a beautiful, skinny white dress with red hair. She waved at me, and I waved back, and she turned and walked through the wall like the wall wasn't there. I never got scared, nor did I feel scared. I actually felt comfortable seeing her in a way. It almost felt like we knew each other and she was just saying hi. I started telling my parents about the encounters, and I found out something that blew my mind. My dad told me my grandparents are mediums and believe that it got passed down to me. I had no idea what a medium was. He had to explain everything to me and how to deal with it. He even gave me a spirit guidebook for mediums to read as a kid. Jump forward to where I was 13. My older sister was a spiritual person and a dark personality in a way. She just moved out of my parents' house and we were cleaning out her old stuff in her bedroom, and then I came across something under her bed that instantly gave me goosebumps from head to my toes. A Ouija board, and a white box that had bold black print on it that said Ouija. I went to go show my mom, and all of a sudden when I went to go pick it up, that little girl that possibly drowned came into a picture in my head, and her red eyes were staring at me in my head, and I quickly dropped it and never touched it again after that. I sat there, and it all made sense why I was seeing all of these random faces in my parents' house. My older sister was using a Ouija board and opened a portal to the spirits, bad or good, to be welcomed into our home. I never really told anyone about this gift or encounters I have except for my really close friends and family. It's hard to tell people when you feel like no one will believe you and think you're lying through your teeth. So you Reddit readers are getting an exclusive preview. I'm now 26, have my own apartment, 2 dogs, and a girlfriend that I live with, and to this day I often think of that little girl in the green dress with the gray, slimy skin. Haven't seen her since neither. Since I moved out of my parents into this apartment, the constant footsteps, knocking, and voices continued. Yes, we live in an apartment, so you will hear those things, but we live on the top floor and I hear the footsteps in our kitchen and down the hall to our bedroom. The knocking comes from the spare bedroom. A new paranormal trick started happening last year as well. Walk past the kitchen and everything is fine. Walk past it again, and a couple of cupboard doors would be open even when I'm home all alone. It happens. So I know it's not the boss lady leaving them open, nor myself. I imagine this is one that's heard of a lot, and I will start by mentioning I have major emotional personality disorder and take quetiapine and diazepam to combat it, so this may be a factor. However, for years before I have experienced unusual things in my home, all seeming to emanate from the spare room, which has always been ominous to visitors. Friends always complain it's unusual and uncomfortable to sleep in. In 2014, I got myself a PSB-7 spirit box, not taking it seriously at all. Me and a friend went to a cemetery, got a name, matched it to a stone. Scared us, but we figured, hey, probably a coincidence. We went back to his place, used it in his room, and the responses were always profane and rude. I sold the spirit box after this. I didn't want to know any more about this kind of stuff and just ditched it. So ever since, my house has felt strange and wrong at certain times. I hear creaking and muffled voices that I cannot make sense of at all. Please note, I hear voices to some degree, but they are much different to these. They are in my head and strong, continuous chatter. My mental health has become extremely bad as of late, and I am more than happy to pin everything on this. But maybe I should ask questions, so here I am. To put it most simply, there are top halves of torsos floating at the end of my bed, and they wear hoods, float left and right, and I just stare as they try and reach out towards me, but can't. I'm not religious, but I say prayers in desperation, and nothing happens. My medication is heavily sedating, so I generally will fall asleep facing these figures. I have flash dreams and sensations of me being grabbed and pulled away from my bed and taken away. Tell me I'm just crazy, but goodness, I've never experienced such realistic visions. If they are hallucinations, I will be relieved. But Quetiapine quells hallucinations, so I have many questions. Can anyone advise me? What are these shadows? Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/Let's Read Official, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.